playing Commander a few years now. And when I was starting out, aside from learning to play the game, I was also trying to pick up on the general flow. I'm talking about what popular commanders do, the different colors, the archetypes that come with them, and what makes a generally good commander card. One thing that always stuck out to me when learning Commander, compared to other card games, was that how much games play at a much slower pace than your average card game. It's a 4-player game, and doubles as a social gathering of sorts, so that does check out. But one thing I've noticed, in particular in the last 12 months, is actually the increasing speed of Commander games. Not just in my friend groups, where... What the fuck? My camera! Not just in my friend groups, where we've definitely improved over time, but also at pods with strangers or at my LGS. This is purely anecdotal, of course, which is why I've been reluctant to talk about it. But a few things have been happening recently in Commander that has really got me thinking now I might not be alone here. When Final Fantasy came to Magic, alongside the influx of new players, hello by the way, if that's you, there was pretty quickly a hot new debate that arose in the Commander community centered around one certain black mage. If you haven't had a chance to sit across from VV in the command zone yet, let me quickly run you through how games go. I've even prepared a flowchart to help you with this. Step 1, get 3 mana and play VV. Step 2, untap with VV. Keep him alive until your next turn. Step 3, you play your next turn for 10 minutes and win the game. VV is the latest in a line of commanders who are must-answer threats that whoop the game around dealing with them or having the game be effectively over. Which is why, unsurprisingly, the Commander community has been arguing online whether or not VV deserves to be added to the game changes list. Many of the arguments I've seen against this include that it's too early, Commander players need to stop being allergic to spot removal, and piles of text that effectively amount to, come on guys, it's not that bad, my VV deck only wins on turn 5. Some of these arguments are definitely more convincing than others, but I think that despite this, the community generally agrees that VV is already a pretty powerful card. Whether or not VV ends up as a game changer though isn't actually what I want to talk about today, but rather that this power and speed that VV brings is actually more recently visible now, but it's part of a general trend that we've been seeing in Commander very quietly, where average decks are moving faster than ever to winning the game, and I expect them to continue to do so in the future. To illustrate this point, I want to talk about a few trends that we can actually measure, rather than just my vibes at the game table. I believe that Wizards are making a conscious push to speeding up Magic in general, which can clearly be seen in Standard even, where before the most recent bans, decks were ending the game on as early as turn 3 consistently. Keep in mind, this is meant to be a format that only includes cards from the last 3 years only, and is now moving as fast as Modern. And these new cards being printed for Standard naturally will bleed their way into Commander. But it's not the conventional aggro tools you might think of in each set that are seeing play. If you look at the most played Commander cards, according to EDH Rec in the last 2 years, you'll see a fair few relative newcomers sitting just below the staples of the format. You won't see banned Boogeyman in Standard Monstrous Rage, but you will find Raids Arisen Nightmare, Lotho Corrupt Sheriff, Atali Primal Conqueror. These cards all appear in around 10% of all decks on EDH Rec now, and represent a newer category of card that can each uniquely accelerate a game of Magic. Raids offers 3 cards to the player per turn cycle, while draining your opponents, or at the very least, forcing them to sacrifice something. Lotho will generate you a massive treasures, accelerating you to game-ending threats, like Atali, who not only comes out faster than ever now, but can effectively close out the game on the spot if not countered immediately. If you're not in the colors for that endgame threat, you can look no further to things like Portal to Phyrexia, which is another must-answer threat that removes your opponent's board presence too. Despite their key differences, each of these cards does find mass success because I believe they share the same key piece of tech, which is one of the fundamental reasons that Commander is speeding up that I'm seeing no one talk about. And that is the text, each opponent. You might have heard of a card called Smothering Tithe. It was first printed in 2019's Ravnica Allegiance. But what you might not know is that it was not so much of the powerhouse it's known to be in Commander. While having relevance in some slower matchups, in Standard 1 versus 1, it could rarely generate the value it became known for. That's to be expected, you might say. When you double the number of players in a game, effects like Tithe grow pretty exponentially. Part of the charm of Commander has always been having old cards with particular wording get a new lease on life when they're put under the context of multiple players. Another example of that is Rhystic Studies. The more players, the more powerful this effect become, the more cards you get to draw. These kind of for each player effects were pretty far and few between over the past few years, generally being reserved as edge cases or unintended consequences of cards from early printing. Whew, how times have changed now. If you search for the specific phrase, each opponent on Scryfall, as of Edge of Eternities, you get 844 results. Yeah, I know. You can call me a nerd in the comments. Whatever. Of those, only 100 were not printed in the last 10 years for the first time. And just shy of them, 500 of them were printed after 2022. In a singleton format, where you can only run one of each card, it's taken some time for us to get there. But I think we're finally approaching a critical mass of genuinely playable and powerful cards that can find immense value specifically in multiple player format. This circles back to Vivi, obviously an exceptional commander in his own right, but also an arguable auto-include in the 99 of any Spellslinger deck. You've probably also noticed at this point how he sports the line each opponent in his text. If you replaced each opponent with target opponent in this case, Vivi would undoubtedly still be a cracked card, but the bar for Vivi to end the game would be higher and likely at least a turn or two slower. Infinite combos aside, his ability needing to deal 120 damage to end the game versus 40 is a huge difference. It would make winning by cantripping significantly harder, and it would lower the free damage Vivi players deal to the table just by playing the cards, and subsequently, it would slow the game down. Vivi isn't an anomaly either. You can find these kinds of newer cards that have for each opponent in many old archetypes that have existed for a long time in Commander now, and unsurprisingly, they're some of the best at closing out games and speeding it up too. Go Wide token decks run cards now like Agate Instigator, Adeline, and War Leader's Call to generate must-answer value by as soon as turn 5. Monument to Endurance and Braylon Skyshark Rider are now turning discard into burn for every opponent. Even non-synergistically, many decks now look to run cards like Abhorrent Oculus and Riptide Gearhulk, not because they particularly go well with the deck, but they are just generally valuable cards in Commander because of their best-in-class ability to adjust to the amount of players in the game. Modern Removal is even starting to adopt this. Sheoldred's Edict is one of the strongest black removal spells that doesn't get talked about enough, alongside Momentum Breaker now for their incredible flexibility, being able to force every player to have to take a negative action. In the future, it may even no longer be as necessary to run sweepers if spot removal becomes this effective consistently. Imagine a world where Swords to Plowshares or Path to Exile targeted each opponent. The Commander community has widely acknowledged as well. One other factor that I think has really pushed the speed of Commander alongside this is something that the Commander community has already widely acknowledged actually, and it's that precons have been massively improving in quality. I remember buying the Izzet Strixhaven precon from a few years ago and pretty much taking the whole thing apart because of how disjointed and difficult to work with it was. I took it apart, built it around Veyran, the alternate commander in that precon, and effectively built it from the ground up into its own powerful deck. But gone are the days now of opening a new precon, immediately looking for and taking out Zatulpa, who somehow keeps making his way into every precon deck. You now basically get this ready to go, fully fleshed, optimized machine right from the jump. In short, these precons are more focused, stay to their theme better, and they're also really unafraid to now run powerful old cards. While this is absolutely a key reason precon quality has improved so much, this does tie back into some of the newer cards that have also been included in these precons. Take a look at some of the face commanders from recent precon. Y'shtola, while definitely coming out of one of the weaker precons in the Final Fantasy bundle, has, in my opinion, one of the highest potential power levels of the face commanders among them. In no small part, due to the card draw she offers for building around her, but also through the consistent damage she's able to do to each opponent. Looking back just the set before, in Tarkir, we got Zergo and the Mardu precon he lead, which comes out of the gate exceptionally fast and drains all opponents for each token sacrificed out of combat. Compare how juiced this effect is to Blood Artist, a still fantastic card that can be great in this deck, but only targets a single player for a measly 1 damage. If aggro wasn't your thing in Tarkir, you can even look to still end the game quickly with massive threats. Tarkir also gave us the Temur precon, where the alternate commander, Eshki, was was able to lead a deck centered around draining your opponents for playing expensive threats. She also dealt damage to each opponent. You could slam down a 9-mana card and drain people for her power. Even without being buffed, her flaw was to deal at minimum 6 damage to the table. This, of course, scaled by a magnitude of 3 every time you played a new, reasonably priced card. So even in tall style decks, games are just not lasting as long anymore. If you look back to the past, you can find each opponent on plenty of infamous cards in Commander 2. That include Torrent of Hailfire and, of course, Yuriko. Both of these happen to have for each opponent stapled to them, though in Yuriko's case, I would probably argue her problems go a bit more beyond that. With all that said, if we can acknowledge the impact sticking for each opponent has on cards and the speed of the Commander game, what should happen next? If I'm being honest, I kind of like it. As I kind of expressed in my video on Goad, which by the way, you guys really seem to love. Thank you. I prefer Commander games to be more concise. That isn't to say I want short, sharp sweat fests either. I ultimately want to sit down with my mates and jam multiple games while we chat, not just one game. There are definite outliers like VV, who were definitely pushed, and they may be addressed by the rules committee later, but I'm happy to see more effects in the game that interact with the table as a whole, and not just a single person. Over the coming few years, I think it's very likely Commander will continue to speed up. I do believe we will, however, reach a point where players will probably have had enough and want the game to slow down just a little bit. For each opponent, effects may even be called out as the reason for all the acceleration, in which case you can now tell them you saw this coming. Edge of Eternity's previews are slowly dropping now, and we are already seeing multiple cards, even at Mythic, with for each opponent as part of their text. So keep an eye out for these effects. Many of them may become the Commander staples of tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Chuck us a like and a sub for more. See you in the next one. Cheers.